The opening lines in the hymn, "My faith has found a resting place," says, "My faith has found a resting place, not in device nor creed. I trust the ever-living one. His wounds for me shall plead. Enough for me that Jesus saves. This ends my fear and doubt. A sinful soul, I come to him. He'll never cast me out." And the chorus says, "I need no other argument. I need no other plea. It is enough that Jesus died and that he died for me." Today, we'll be looking at hope. Hope, an acronym for have only positive expectations. And we'll be looking at the two of the stalwarts of the Bible. The first one is the Joseph, and we'll also be looking at Job, two J's today. For Job and Joseph also, right? They looked toward a bigger picture. They went through some terrible times in their life. However, for them to only have positive expectations, for sure, right? What they were looking at, what they were going through, it is for sure that they were not only looking at that immediate expectation, they were not only looking at what they were going through, but they were looking towards the future. They were looking towards the bigger picture. And it for you, and certainly for even for myself, right? It is important that we look towards the bigger picture. This is what the Word of God tells us in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. "But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive." The background behind this is Joseph, after he was sold to Midianite traders and taken to Egypt, where he was working as a slave, and his family, they were in later years taken to Egypt. When Joseph rose to prominence, he sent for his father. His, after a famine arose where they were living, and after coming to Egypt, his father died. And his brothers, fearing that Joseph would take out his wrath upon them after they had sold him into slavery. But Joseph forgave his brothers, and he said to them that although you meant evil towards me, but God meant it for good, to bring to pass, as it is to say, to save much people alive. And let us look at what the Word of God in Romans chapter 8 tells us. In Romans chapter 8, verse 28, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose." We recognize that Joseph, he was living in Egypt, and he was working in tandem with God. He was working according to the purpose that God has for his life. And that although he was placed in prison, yet while there in prison, he arose to great prominence because God was with him, and he had hope, having only positive expectations. You can only have positive expectations when you not only look to God, but you do not focus on the situation that you are in, but recognize that even in that bad situation that you might be going through, God has a purpose for you and for your life. God is always in control. When you are in this state, that is when you can have only positive expectations, because you will recognize that although you are going through something bad right now, but God, who is always in control of things, and as he has said in his word, that he will never leave you nor forsake you, and he is always in control. When we look towards God, and when we look and realize that he has a plan for us, then we can have positive expectations, because we know that God is in control, and since God is in control, then his plans for your life will be accomplished. And though you might be crushed now, but not destroyed, let us look at what the Word of God tells us in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. We are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted but not forsaken, cast down but not destroyed. My dear friends, when we recognize that God, who said it to us in his word that he will never leave us nor forsake us, though bad situations come, yet we can have hope in God. Hope knowing that God is with us and he will never leave us nor forsake us. And God was with Joseph. He was with Joseph as he was placed in the pit by his brothers. He was with Joseph when he was in the house of Potiphar. He was with Joseph when he was in the prison. God was with Joseph, and as Joseph was elevated to the palace, God was still with him. And because God was with him, whatever Joseph's hands touched prospered. God was not only with Joseph, but we recognize that God was certainly also with Job. And this is what the Word of God tells us in Job. Job, who looked towards the big picture. Job, who looked towards a higher calling. Job, who knew that there is a God and he will never leave him nor forsake him. This is what the Word of God in Job chapter 19 tells us. For I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold, and not another, though my reins be consumed within me. Job, who was perplexed, Job, who was going through a persecution by the enemy, yet Job, who was resolute in his service to God. He looked towards the bigger picture and he had hope. Have only positive expectations. Job looked towards the bigger picture. Look towards the bigger picture today, because whatever situation that you are going through, remember that God is always in control. You might not see the bigger picture now, but know that God has a plans for you. The bigger picture rests entirely in the hands of God. Despite what you are going through now, just remember that God's plans for your life will be accomplished. Therefore, have only positive expectations. When you can have these positive expectations, That is when you are rest assured and you are putting your confidence in the hands of God, knowing that He will never leave you nor forsake you. And whatever situation that you go through, God has a plan for you, and He is always in control. Therefore, have only positive expectations, and these expectations are rooted and grounded in knowing that God is always in control despite the situation that you go through. And pray that as you go throughout this day, have only positive expectations by looking at the big picture, by looking at the fact that God is always in control. Have a wonderful day.